Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
Welcome back to Genuine Humans podcast. Wendy, it's lovely to have you co-hosting again. How has your week been?
Really good, thank you. And extra grateful to be working from home because it's getting really chilly now. And my team keeps sending me pictures of their fireplaces and their heating switched on and everything. So yeah, it's coming into that time of year. Very glad to be inside. How are you?
I'm kind of enjoying being out and about, having meetings, going to events again. But it's been interesting actually, because whilst I'm enjoying, I live in London and been going into London again. But I went to the theatre a couple of weekends ago, and it was just a bit too much.
Right.
I ended up, I've never done this before, but I walked out because it was just too many people, just a bit too much. So it's kind of a reminder that we're all just sort of adapting to everything that's going on. But interesting times.
We've got our first cinema outing tomorrow since it all kicked off. So I'm worried I might feel a bit like that as well. So we'll see.
We are delighted to be joined by Cheryl Calverley, the CEO of Eve Sleep. Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Hello, good to see you.
Cheryl, let's kick off with a question that I like to ask all of our guests. How did you get to where you are now?
It's a very big question, isn't it? I think basically by having an absolute fear of doors closing and corridors getting narrower in my life, which has meant that at every turn I've tried to do something a little bit different and do something which scared me and do something which I couldn't already do or which didn't look like the stuff that I'd already done before. And that's kind of what's taken me on a journey which started out in Unilever as a grad and went my way through a number of different businesses all the way to being the CEO of a scale-up sleep wellness business as I am today.
And so let's just kind of unpick a few things. So starting off at Unilever, did you always know that you wanted to go into marketing?
My sort of background, my trade, if you like, is psychology. So I did a degree in psychology and loved psychology a lot. Actually, before that, I was a bookmaker briefly. And there's nothing better to look at the psychology of human beings than to watch them bet. It's fascinating. I love watching people. So I loved my degree, and I love the experimental nature. So psychology is a very new science. No one really knows what makes people do what they do, and everything is always very fresh. And when I kind of came out at the back end of my degree, it's difficult to know what to do with your career. And I was contemplating doing something sort of academic or going into clinical psychology. But my kind of family are entrepreneurs. My dad's an entrepreneur. I mean, that's a very grand term. He's a multiple business owner, should we say. And I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I'm very competitive and I like that side of things. And I like to work in a sort of fairly fast-paced environment. So sort of doing research-based clinical psychology felt like it wasn't going to press all the buttons. And I kind of stumbled into Milk Round, and I started talking to businesses. I was going to go and be a management consultant for a little bit. I did apply for, and I didn't quite post my application. I wrote it, then didn't post it.
Okay.
Someone said to me, "If you become a management consultant, you'll never get your laundry done."
Okay, just because of the long hours, you mean?
Yeah, long hours, lots of travel, and I had a real moment. I was about 20. Well, I've already been 20 at the time, and I had a real moment of going, I don't want to be someone who never gets the laundry. Not that I'm a particularly homely person, but the concept of never having enough time in your life to do the laundry, let alone anything else you might enjoy, felt. Yeah, no, so I suppose that, psychology, marketing is the world's biggest psychology experiment. I'm basically paid to experiment on humans and try and see what they do when I encourage them to do things and to watch their behavior. And I really, really enjoy that, and it gives me kicks. So when I sort of went on a milk round and started talking to businesses, I thought, actually, I think I want to go into business, and I think I want to go into the marketing side of business, the commercial side of business. And I kind of stumbled across, a couple of people, Unilever, Mars, Nestle, P&G, all were recruiting. There were brands I'd heard of, and I liked, I like physical products. I didn't realize how much I did actually until I stopped working with them at the AA, but I like touching and feeling packaging and tasting, and I love, more than anything else, I love seeing the stuff I've done affect other people, and I love it in a really simple way. I think one of my sort of happiest moments in the moment I realised I probably was in the right job was I got on the tube. I would have been 24, 25, fairly young, working on Marmite at the time, and I sat opposite this lady, and she was just eating these Marmite rice cakes, and she was just really happy, and like she was just, like you when you've got a bit of moment to yourself and you're eating a snack you enjoy, and I watched her, and I just was like, oh, she wouldn't be having this moment if I hadn't created that product, and I had this incredible sense of omnipotence and impact, and yeah, it's ridiculous, but that's what I think. As a marketer, works in product, you get that privilege, and I really enjoyed that.
If only she knew who she was opposite. She'd probably have been super excited.
Some little brand manager. That's all I was at the time, but yeah.
Did you get to work on the sort of love or hate Marmite campaign? Was that something that you got to work with?
It did. You come into marketing and you don't really. I think some people come into marketing and they think they're coming into a creative job, and some people come in and think they're coming into a financial job or a commercial job, and it's all of those. But I wouldn't particularly call myself creative by trade or by background. I'm not particularly artistic or musical, but the immense privilege of coming to work in an idea, which Love and Hate was. So Love and Hate had been around for about 5 or 6 years before I joined the Marmite team, and having really starting to work in an idea, in a concept, and go, how do we take this forward, this incredible brand asset, and what do we build out of it, and how do we take this brand forward, which was so resonant with particularly British society, which people got really clear ideas of what it meant to them, was a real privilege. But also, you definitely met some complete knobs and quite a lot of people sitting in, particularly some of the creative industries. Actually, they kind of get a bit sort of fixated on quite how important the purity of the creativity is, and forget that they're selling products to people that love them, not selling, art to artists.
So now working as a CEO of Eve Sleep, it feels like the last 18 months has been really interesting for direct-to-consumer brands. How has it actually been for Eve Sleep over the last 18 months?
I think interesting is a good word. I'm not sure if it's what my French MD would call English interesting, which means crap. It hasn't been crap. It's been genuinely interesting. The world was going in a particular direction anyway, and it was going much more D2C. But D2C was sort of slightly stumbling along being a digital version of retail, I think. So it was kind of going, what do bricks and mortar look like when they go onto a website? I think what the past 18 months has given us a chance to do is to suddenly go from being the sort of tail to the dog. And suddenly we are like, actually, we're right at the front now. So, we've got a project live in the business, which is called Project Minnow. Because I said, actually, the minnow is now the shark. We are the ones now leading the pack. We're the ones now defining, what an e-commerce experience should and could be. So it's really taken the shackles off and given us the confidence to lead, and to not be constantly going, oh, but the bricks and mortar guys, they're bigger, they've got this and they've got that. It's also, I think, I speak for my team, but it's been wonderful watching the team sort of come together and accelerate the decision making. And a young business is, and D2C tends to be young, is particularly set up for these circumstances because it's born with change in it. There is no fixed way of doing things. So watching the business pivot and move and accelerate and decelerate and make decisions quickly has been, when I say the business, I mean my team, has just been incredible. Just it's been able to sort of bottle that, I think, is the challenge now as we get back to being a bit more normal.
So coming back to your journey, I'd like to rewind even further if we can. So we talked about what you did at university. So I'd like to go back even further than that, maybe to school, and really look at what you were like when you were little, and if you knew back then what you wanted to be when you grew up.
I wanted to be Prime Minister.
Brilliant.
There's still time.
I know. Yeah, so I was. My mum and dad were separated, so I lived with my mum. So I grew up believing that women could. No one ever told me that women couldn't do anything. And actually, I was born under a female prime minister, whatever we think of Maggie T. And my mum just did everything because there wasn't a man around, and I just did everything because there wasn't a man around. And so I suppose I grew up going, well, I just want to be prime minister, and I want to do anything that I want to do, and no one told me that I couldn't, which has been very helpful. Yeah, and I think I'm a fairly intense creature, and when I get into things, I get properly into things, and that's what most people would have described me as a child as well. I think fairly intense, very geeky, quite swotty. I was in Mensa when I was about 11.
Wow.
Yeah, that sort of child.
Would you dare to take the test again now? I'd be worried about doing that in case I'd gone backwards.
Yeah, and I think I probably would go backwards. So my mentor score was very high. It was actually higher than Carol Vorderman's, and that was one of my biggest points of pride. But I think it was because it's a formula that's dependent on age. So I think if I took it now, I would have gone backwards. It was an odd thing for an 11-year-old to do, go to Mensa meetings, but I did, and write to newspapers and do all sorts of weird things. But I did. I was a fairly odd child.
So, I love a fellow geek, don't worry.
Geeks will inherit the earth, I feel.
So, what advice would you give to your teenage self?
Oh God, that's difficult, isn't it? I think, I was constantly told, be patient, listen, don't leap to conclusions. And it's impossible to do that because you're being told to do that. I think the advice I would give to my teenage self is probably take your time. That, there's no point running anywhere, because when you get there, what have you got to? And I think I was very lucky to sort of get lots of things in place fairly early in my life that meant I could concentrate. I met my husband very early. I settled down in lots of bits of my life, which meant I could concentrate on other bits. So I think the other thing I would give advice, not to perhaps me because I ended up doing it, but to any teenager, is just take things one thing at a time. Don't try and tackle everything all at once and expect to be perfect on every front, from love life to daughtering to friending to careering, because it's too much. Just try and do one thing at once, I think.
Yeah, great advice, I think. When we've spoken before, Cheryl, I think you mentioned that you're from Southport originally.
I am.
Is some of the family of my other half. So you moved to London from Southport. Was that a massive culture shock?
It was huge. So I was quite a bumpkin, and if my mum's listening, she'd be horrified, because that would be a horrible way to describe. But so I grew up in Southport. I don't think I particularly went to a city, aside from maybe if we flew into an airport on holiday, until I was sort of 15 or 16. Liverpool was the first city. I never went to London until we moved to London. So it was quite a culture shock, but I absolutely loved it. I think Southport is a wonderful town, but it's a town where everyone knows everyone. My mum was a teacher, my grandpa was a teacher. So if you're a teacher, also everyone knows you. So everywhere I would go, I was Mrs. Bouton's daughter or Mr. Warburton's granddaughter, which meant that everything I did or said would get sort of played back to my family. And I felt very sort of trapped is the wrong word, but I felt more watched than I wanted to be, I think. And the wonderful thing about moving to London is the freedom of the anonymity to find out who you are and who you want to be. And you can pursue any bit of yourself without anyone kind of sort of judging you and going, well, that's not what your brother did, and I'm really surprised. I spoke to your mum and I didn't expect, it's very liberating actually being anonymous.
Very good point. And I imagine that over the years you've worked with lots of great people. So are there any genuine humans in particular who've really had a good influence on your career?
Oh, goodness me, yeah. So I have on my shoulder, which you can't see because I've got long sleeves on, but I have a tattoo of an angel, which is a weeping angel, which I drew, not on my own shoulder, but I drew for the tattooist to recreate. And actually that's to remind me about all the people who watch over me and have watched over me over my whole life. My first proper boss at Unilever, a guy called Matt Burgess, who I'm seeing in a few weeks for a bit of dinner, was amazing. And to this day, I sometimes close my eyes and go, what would Matt do now? I was very lucky to work under a brilliant boss at Birdseye, a lady called Margaret Jobling, who's now at NatWest. And again, I sometimes close my eyes and I can hear her voice. There's a moment in a meeting once where I said, we've all agreed this. And she said, listen to your colleagues, they aren't agreeing. And I still hear that sometimes when you think everyone's agreed, but they're not agreeing. So that's again, she's a good mentor of mine. And then more recently, my old boss at the AA, a guy called Mike Lloyd, who is now my chairman at Eve, who is a wonderful, wise soul, and is someone I pick up the phone to whenever I've got sort of confusion and conflict. And just whenever I sort of doubt myself, he's very good at reminding me what I'm good at and sort of putting everything in context. And then I've got a close friend who works at an agency, who is tend to the person I phone if I'm in a bit of a panic and I just want to be grounded. And he's always got some sort of what I call the wet fish treatment. He'll give me a bit of a slap and tell me to put my socks up, which you need it. So yeah, I've got a bunch of people that have kept me going, angels on my shoulder.
Perfect. And bringing you back up to current day or recent years even, you made the transition from CMO to CEO of Eve Sleep. Did it feel like a very natural transition for you?
I mean, it did. I'm a fairly nosy bugger. So not a lot goes on in a business that I haven't got an opinion about. So, I don't think I've ever felt like I'm in a marketing box. And coming from FMCG, in FMCG, marketeers own the whole P&L and are sort of leading the strategy of the whole business. So it's not at all unnatural. And when I came to Eva's CMO, I very much came to be part of a business where marketing was right at the heart, the start and the end. It was brand led. So, and when I came to Eve, I kind of came going, I think I can see a progression potentially to CEO or at least a broader role here. So it did feel very natural. I'm also I think a lot of the stuff that you pick up as a CEO, there's two sort of extra bits you pick up as a CMO to CEO. One is around people and culture. That's something that most CMOs aren't dealing with day in, day out, but as a CEO, it's a huge part of your job. And the other is kind of operations and logistics and sort of the practicality of like literally getting the stuff delivered over the line. I'm a fairly people-y, culture-y kind of person, partly marketeer as a background, partly I'm, as I say, a people. I love watching people, and I love, it's all fascinating psychology. So that came sort of I was very, very glad to get that. And I also fundamentally believe that brands and the team, the employers, are one and the same thing. I don't think you can deliver a brand without a culture that matches your brand. So it was wonderful to bring that together. The logistics stuff is a bit harder. My COO is very supportive and sympathetic, spends a lot of time explaining things quite slowly to me in words of one syllable. But I quite like it because it's very down-to-earth people, and it's very physical product, and it's warehouses and vans, and it's all very, you can kind of point at things and you know where stuff is. So I found all that fairly natural.
And what have you been most proud of so far at eSleep?
That's a really, really hard question. I mean, the obvious thing to say would be, how the team has dealt with COVID and how the team has dealt with upping and offing and remoting and then deremoting. I think, generally speaking, I'm proud by how much we punch above our weight. And we do that. So wherever you look, whether it's the quality of our experience, the quality of our products, the quality of our marketing and creative, our financial performance, all of it is more than you'd expect of our business and our people and our sort of official capability. And we do that by sheer sort of creativity, passion, innovation, collaboration. We do it by sheer force of will and culture. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I think there's areas we don't punch above our weight that we need to. And I think once we get those bits going as well, the business is going to be stellar.
And just thinking about other brands that are out there at the moment, who's really impressing you at the moment and why?
KFC, I think it's hard not to be impressed with KFC because they have managed well, and also actually KFC and McDonald's both for different reasons. I think fast food as a category, bloody nightmare category, is completely off trend, and we've just been through COVID, so all its restaurants has closed down. So you should look at that category and go, that is a shit show. It's a hellish place to work. Why on earth would you go there? And yet, if you look at both McDonald's and KFC, what they're delivering is brilliant brands, brilliant experiences, creative work, which people talk about, which is so hard to do, food, which people love, no sense of guilt. I mean, yes, you've always got a little bit of an overhang, but people are not guilty to say they're going for a KFC, not guilty to say they're having a McDonald's. And I just think the job they have done with those brands is phenomenal. They move organically across channels. They don't worry about sort of old-fashioned and new-fashioned. They don't follow the fads. They know exactly who they are at their hearts. But they also feel very innovative, very new. It's not as though they feel old-fashioned, but both businesses must be, 50 plus years old, probably older for McDonald's. So I think those are the brands I think are doing a fantastic job. I think John Lewis has got some interesting challenges in front of it. I think it's trying some good stuff. I think it needs to really, really revolutionize itself, and I think it knows that, and it's working hard on that. So I think that'll be one to watch 2 or 3 years if they get it right. I think people kind of talk about new and funky brands a lot, and I think it's quite easy to be impressive if you're a new and funky brand and you don't have to make money and you don't have to deal with brand equity and you don't have to deal with, sort of history and being off trend. So I very rarely I'm impressed by the likes of a Peloton or a Gymshark or whatever, because it's kind of innovation is an easy way to grow. I'm more impressed by traditional brands that stay fresh, relevant, new, cutting edge, pushing the boundaries, which I think, some brands are doing.
So how has the pandemic affected relationship building, sort of both internally, but also with your suppliers and partners?
I think it's been really hard, actually. I mean, I am a very people person, and I find it very hard to build relationships when I haven't had a chance to, buy someone a drink or make them a cup of tea or talk about the weather because we've both come to the same place on the same time. So I think it's been really hard. most of our business success is built on existing relationships, partnerships, friends, angels on my shoulder. When you're in a young business, you really sort of you rely on the karma you've built through your career. So most of our relationships are existing relationships. Where we brought on new relationships, it's been really difficult. I think particularly developing products. I mean, through the pandemic, there's quite a lot of people saying, oh, it's amazing, we've discovered we can work remotely. And the answer is yes, you can work remotely for the business you have today. But as you're trying to develop new things for the future, whether it's creative work, whether it's products, whether it's processes and systems, whether it's new relationships, incredibly hard to do remotely and not something I'm keen to do. I'm very clear with my team. I want to run a business to be with people building stuff together. I don't want to run a business to sit in the corner of my room on my own. That's just not rewarding and fulfilling to me. And I think we've definitely felt that as a quite peoply sort of culture, quite a collaborative culture as a business.
And do you know what? I've heard in the industry people saying that you're just absolutely brilliant to work with and a real joy. What would be your ideal partnership? What makes a great partnership with an agency?
I'd love to know who's saying that. I'll go and beast them later. Look, I do this for fun, right? If you're not living life for pleasure, then kind of why are you living life? So my ideal partnership is very, very simply someone who's doing it for the same reasons that I am, which is to do great stuff that we're all really proud of, that makes us really happy to go home each night, but to do it with a smile on our face, to do it knowing that what we're doing today is part of a journey, it's part of a life, it's part of a life's relationship, a life's work, it's stuff you're going to tell your grandkids about. You're not doing it for this deadline or tomorrow's CPA. So I just like people who, have a sense of humor, have a passion and commitment for what we're doing. And I very much like people. I don't pay people to agree with me, and there's absolutely no point in me working with an agency if all they're going to do is tell me that I'm right. I'm paying for people who are better than me, and my God, I'm surrounded by people better than me. Tell me what you think is different. Hold my feet to the fire, or else it's pointless. So I like a good bit of what my mate would call jousting. I love a good bit of jousting and a bit of argy-bargy to get to the right answer. That's the fun of life.
I love that. And what advice would you give to any future CEOs?
There's lots of CEO jobs. Not all CEOs are the same, and every business requires very different things. And big businesses and small businesses and old businesses and young businesses and bureaucratic businesses and manufacturing. But I think if you're going to CEO a business like I CEO, so a young business which is scaling rapidly, which is driven by its people and its culture and its capability rather than any particular technical, it's not like it's got a factory or particular IP or anything. It's all about the people, and you need the people in your business to care and be passionate about what you're doing. You need them in their spare time to be wanting to think about work, not thinking about work because work's a burden and, oh my God, I've got to fret about it, but literally wanting to think about work, because that's where you get the extra energy and you get the ideas. So I think, really think about how you make work fun, engaging, rewarding, somewhere people would choose to be. Is really, you're competing with all the other things they could be doing in their life, which are way more fun. So how do I make sure this is fun? I mean, that does require sometimes a bit of jazz hands from me, but that's kind of my style and and my leadership team. I think the other thing that one of the most challenging things of being a CEO is probably navigating the path between a bias to action, which you kind of have, particularly in a young business. It's very easy to act, and if you act, then the whole business acts because you're the CEO. So if you say something, the whole business ends up leaping. Versus holding firm on your strategy and not diverting and not looking like you're a bit of a flibbity-gibbet and people don't know if they're coming or going. And it's a really careful line to walk. My tendency, partly because I'm a bit of an intellectual strategic thinker, my tendency is to go, I've got the strategy, this is the strategy, and we're following it, and sort of don't be diverted, which is really helpful for a lot of people. It means you get good movement and action and execution. But equally, there's times when you need to pivot. And it's being able to really signal, yes, we've got the strategy, but for these very good reasons, we're now doing this and we're doing this quickly, but not making that so often that you get whiplash. It's a really difficult line to walk. So almost knowing when to act, and your base position is almost not acting. It's watching and listening and coordinating, but then choosing to act. It's difficult, but that would be my main advice to think about. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we're coming up to the part of the podcast now where we'll get a little bit more personal, if you don't mind. So I'd like to start with, what would be your perfect weekend? And are there any guilty pleasures we should know about?
So my perfect weekend, probably it would start with a lie-in and a book, definitely. It would have an afternoon with friends in the sun, with food and drink, probably segueing into an evening of some sort of vaguely competitive drinking-based sporty type thing. So, I don't know, table tennis or darts or something like that, bowling, I don't know, something which involves a bit of, yelling at each other. And then the Sunday would be spent riding my horse. I've got horses. And then probably doing something vaguely nice in the afternoon with the kids, kicking a football around or going for a walk or something, maybe a pub dinner, although the kids are not brilliant in a pub, but I like a pub dinner. So it would be people, and it would be laughter, and it would be a bit of competition, and definitely the sun, and a bit of me time as well. And then guilty pleasures. So I'm quite competitive, play quite a lot of different sorts of sport, but my son has got quite into snooker recently. And I play a bit of pool and play a bit of snooker. And I have found myself spending more and more and more time at the snooker club on my own quite often. So last night, I came in from work, whatever, put the kids to bed, whatever. And about 9:30, I said to my husband, I'm just going to go to the snooker club. And I went and spent 2 hours potting snooker balls. And I'm looking at I'm looking at the ladies' masters, wondering whether I should be very silly and enter the ladies' masters and get a waistcoat out. So it's a rather obscure guilty pleasure, but probably pool or snooker would be up there, which would not have been the same answer in my 20s, let's be very clear. I had a much wilder 20s. So I'm a little disappointed that it's gone from, wild nights out and going to work with no sleep to creeping off to the snooker club. But there you go.
It's funny, isn't it? But yeah, do it. Enter the women's masters.
Oh God,
yeah.
Yes.
I spent some time in snooker halls as a late teen. I've sort of done it the other way around. Yeah. Oh, it was all to do with a boyfriend at the time.
It's unusual for women. So when I grew up, and partly Southport's an old-fashioned town, and partly it's the generation. Women weren't allowed in the snooker halls. So I played a lot of pool with my dad and my mum, actually. We spent a lot of time in pubs when I was a kid, kind of grew up in pubs. So I can find my way around a queue and a ball. But the first time I played snooker wasn't really... I played a little bit once with my granddad, but really until I came to London in my 20s was the first time women were allowed in snooker halls. So there's this dearth of good women players because most women have only been playing at most sort of 20 years, unless you've got a private table at home.
We're going to have a competition because I've actually got a pool table in my house. So I've been all throughout lockdown, I've been practicing.
Tamara, so we can probably do this. There's a lovely pool hall in Waterloo that I go to. We could definitely do a pool. I'm thinking about starting the London Adland Pool League, actually.
Fantastic. Yes.
I think it'd be good fun.
Forget golf. It's all about pool.
Right, I've started something here. Okay, so coming back to Marmite, which we were talking about earlier, love or hate?
I'm a lover. But one thing we always did on the team, actually, was we tried to keep a balance of lovers and haters on the team. So it was a recruitment question. But actually, you do have to be quite careful because only about 25% of the country buys Marmite regularly. So it's not a 50-50 thing, although we like to tell everyone it is a 50-50. So you do have to be very aware of keeping a balance. But yeah, I'm a lover. My mum has it sort of a centimetre thick on toast, whereas I like just a smidge with some very, very lovely melty butter. But yeah.
I had a different ex-boyfriend when we first started going out. I think we were about 19 and he'd never tried Marmite. I think you have families who are Marmite families or not Marmite families, and mine was definitely a Marmite family. So he thought he'd be brave and he'd try some Marmite, and it wasn't just a little corner on a bit of toast. No, he went in with a spoon. And I'm looking at him in horror, thinking even I couldn't do that. And I love this stuff. Oh, he was a mess. It was such a shame, but it was also quite funny.
It was, a core bit of the Marmite strategy. So, the taste you're exposed to young are tastes you come to love. And my kids are nuts on blue cheese because they ate it very young. So his core bit of the Marmite strategy was how you exposed to the taste young. And a lot of mums, it's one of these weird things, because whilst Marmite is salty, you have such a very tiny amount of it. Actually, the salt is fine. And a lot of mums are looking for savoury tastes to give, their kids who are turning to just eating sweets. So, Marmite toast soldiers dipped in egg is one of the best introductions into sort of savoury taste for kids that their mums are struggling to get onto savoury stuff. So it's a great way to get them into the taste young, expose them young to the taste. Yeah.
So Cheryl, if you weren't doing what you do now, what's your alternative career? And please tell me it's going to be Prime Minister.
Well, I will still be Prime Minister one day. My alternative career, I don't think I'm diplomatic enough to be a politician, actually, much as I think I could probably do a decent job of running this shit show at the moment. as I've got older, I've spent more and more time mentoring people and coaching people, and I find myself endlessly doing it, and I really enjoy it. So I suspect I would probably go back to my psychology roots and retrain as a clinical psychologist, and get back into a bit more of the intellectual headspace of people. I've got a bit of a side gig. I'm fascinated with neuroscience. I read a lot of neuroscience. I've got a bit of a side gig in neuroscience. I do a little bit of sort of quantum physics and a bit of that sort of stuff. I've got a bit of a geeky side gig over there. So I'd probably be an academic clinical neuropsychologist, something like that.
Amazing. Well, I feel a bit shallow segueing into this question, but it's a karaoke question. So do you prefer solos, group songs, or avoiding it altogether?
So there was a very famous karaoke night. So when I was marketing director at the AA, and we briefed our advertising campaign, which turned into the Singing Baby, if anyone saw the Singing Baby with Tina Turner. And when we briefed the campaign, I said, I want to win an IPA. Guys, never won an IPA. Want to win an IPA. This is going to be so good it wins an IPA, which is the ultimate award of advertising effectiveness. It means you know that your money's been well spent. And I said, if it wins an IPA, I will. I said, and then I did. I said, this is your one chance, your one opportunity. Will you take it or let it go? And I said, if we win an IPA, I will stand up and I will do karaoke, Lose Yourself, Eminem.
Brilliant.
Oh, brilliant.
And we won the IPA. So the kind of the celebration night was a very, very big, very drunken night. We took over a big sort of karaoke room. And basically, I had agreed I would open the whole thing on my own, doing Eminem. And we weren't quite drunk enough either. There's about 30, 40 people, not quite drunk enough. And I got up, and just before I got up, my account director at the time, my managing partner, turned to me and said, just to be very clear, Cheryl, this is your show, and I'm not helping you. And I had to get up and do Lose Yourself. And I did, and it was great. So I can do a bit of solo karaoke. I'm not a particularly good singer, but I'm quite an exhibitionist, and I don't mind. I love a bit of a group sing along. We do a family camp with my husband's family. We had a big old sing song around the fire last weekend. So I think there's something wonderful like humans making noise and creating stuff together.
100%. So if Tamara and I could gift you an extra hour every day, how would you spend it?
Probably doing some form of competitive sport. So if you could give me an extra hour every day, I'd take up a new competitive sport. So I'd quite like to take up cricket, or I'd spend it playing a bit more badminton, riding my horse a bit more. A bit more time on a pool table. My greatest the thing that got me down most in COVID actually was the complete lack of any sort of competition, because apparently all sport just got destroyed. And apart from an awful lot of rummy cub with my husband, I couldn't find any way to be competitive, and it left me feeling very empty. So yeah, some sort of extra competitive sport I'd probably spend it doing.
Excellent. How would your friends describe you, and how would you like them to describe you?
Do you know what? Actually, I got described as a very nice person. A couple of times I've been described as a very nice person, and each time I always find it quite a surprising description, because it's not necessarily what I would describe myself as. And my son, when I got made CEO, this is a slightly sort of self-indulgent story. When I got made CEO, my son said to me, who at the time was 7, he said, "Why have they chosen you to be CEO, Mum? What makes them think that you can do CEO?" And I started to explain, well, I'm quite strategic and I'm quite good with numbers, and so I get to lots of good answers. And he just looked at me and he said, "Is it just because you're really nice?"
Oh.
And I was absolutely overcome that my son thought I was nice. Is it just because you're nice? So I think they probably would say I'm quite nice, although not. I wouldn't say I'm not a kind of nice person. They would say I'm ruthlessly competitive, very ambitious, ridiculously high energy, do and take on far more than I should, loud, opinionated, fairly dogmatic, but bloody good fun, I think.
Perfect.
I think that's a perfect sort of coming to the end of the podcast, because what I wanted to just say is there anything that we haven't asked you that you want to answer, or, I'm giving the platform to you. You can have any sort of closing thoughts.
I think the only closing thought I would give, if anyone is listening, is I know people who say, the knockbacks in life are what make you stronger, but I do generally believe sort of in life stuff just happens, and not that it happens for a reason, but whatever happens, embrace it and believe that it will make your life better and bigger and stronger. And I think I think you can sometimes feel like you're being under attack from life and it's all happening to you. But I think if you can take any moment, any experience and say, right, how can I get hold of that and snatch that and say, what am I going to use that experience, that thing that happened to me, how am I going to use that to make me happier, my life better, me more capable or able or learn something? I think if you can get yourself, there's this concept in psychology which is called the agentic state, which means you're in this state of kind of almost helplessness and everything is happening to you. And it's incredibly depressing. And it's what if you move an animal into the state of helplessness, they get depressed. And what I see in people is when they start to feel helpless, like life is happening to them, that they become depressed and they lose their energy and they lose their mojo. If you can turn it around and say, I'm taking life, I'm saying yes, I'm choosing what to do, I'm embracing life, and I'm using it to my ends, you will be much happier all the way. And I think that would be my advice to everyone. Don't ever let life happen to you. Take life and do what you want to do with it.
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.